All right, so let's start with scene 4. So this is, we've got lots of B-roll, lots of story. This is just basically a transition from one scene to another. There's a little bit of, we've had the first big scene and then we're transitioning to the next scene. So again, we want to keep this short, but there's a few things that happen and there's a few things, and why are we telling this? We've always got to ask that question of why are we putting this in the video? Is it really worth it? And I think it is, because it kind of sets up that we're getting towards the end. It kind of tells that by the time we got to this final challenge of the causeways, that a lot of things had already happened and a lot of time had passed. So even though we're only going to compress it down to like 3 minutes, I think it's really worth telling that story. So what we want to be able to get out of this scene is basically just show how many things happened, how many things got in our way, all these other challenges. They're kind of minor by comparison, but kind of built up to, you know, towards this, builds up to this final scene sort of thing. So, so it's worth keeping them in there, but we've got to be pretty brutal on what's in there. So I know there's a whole bunch of really good footage of Murray's run, but it doesn't really tell a story. So we want to be really limited with it. So it's really pretty and it looks really nice, but we want to keep it short. I've actually added a few other bits. I've got some camera footage of some photos we took on the phone, so I've included that in. And I've gone through, so everything in here is effectively based on, you know, B-roll versus stories and so on. So probably our key thing is, let's jump into the, so we've done all this in the media page, we're now going to jump to the edit page, right? So here we get to have some real fun. All right, so I'm going to create my timeline here. What I do is just effectively use the same, use the, you know, what we're calling it everywhere else. So I keep saying 3, but it's actually 4. Scene 4, we're just going to have one video track, one audio track to start with. Create that. And then we go for a search, all bins. We're searching all bins for scene number 4. So this is all our footage. Now, I want to find my main points. So I've only got the one, in fact. There you go. All right, okay, that was the blockage. So a few other things that happened before then. All right, so that's 2. Okay, so I'm just going to grab that main piece and grab that down on my timeline. Kind of looking at where we're at. Yeah, we're sort of looking at roughly 3 minutes or somewhere out here. So this is a fair chunk. We'll probably cut that down even more, right? Work out what we really need in that.
That was like a stunt bird.
So now it's just about trimming.
Fine, ages stuff that's been very closed, but is it really closed? Looks like they left it for dirt bikers. Looks like they left it there just for dirt bikers.
So there's even a couple of bits there where we're repeating ourselves a little bit. So you can cut all that out.
Just for dirt bikers. So what's the way back? How far back do we have to go?
Yeah, so that's a good point. So that's from there. Chop that out.
What's the way back? How far back do we have to go?
Now, audio changes slightly here. And so what I want to do is just cut that out, cut these pieces out, and I just want to bring that particular audio up a bit so we can hear it properly.
So, if we go back to the stop, turn up Bundle Hill Road. Yeah. Yeah.
So this is Gary talking about, you know, what the options are. So it's kind of telling our story through dialogue effectively. So that's probably getting a bit boring there. We've got the general idea. We're just talking about where it actually, the turn off is.
So like a plan.
Sounds like a plan. Excellent. In fact, I'm even going to use that. That's a good segue. And engine starting, right? That's perfect, right? So it's just, again, it's our story being told This is where we don't want to worry too much. Like I brought that audio up just to be able to hear it, but I don't want to spend too much time refining everything, right? This is just, we're just being brutal cuts at the moment. So we just got the start. We can refine stuff later. So there's, that's taking off down the road. So that's a good, so right there we've got basically a third of our 3 minutes is used up with that, right? But it's given us something to base on, right? So now I can kind of jump out of that, look at the rest of the scene, what's everything else around it, that we can start to piece in and fill in the the bits around it. So I probably need, first of all, something that transitions me from the previous scene, which is probably this bit in the dirt. So we're just leaving this dirt bit. Probably just go from there.
Yeah, something's not entirely straight with this.
So I'm just going to grab that bit, drop that into there. And then we can we'll probably kick in some music. And we've got all this vision. So this is what coming down Bumble Hill. So that's some pretty good bits in there. That's us taking a quick pit stop. That's coming up to, actually this is good here. This is okay. So grab this little bit here. Whenever you see someone sort of shift their head, or you shift your head and move around, that I like to cut before I see that. So as soon as I see that shift, bring it back. And I cut there because I don't want that in there. It's not very nice. So I'm just gonna plonk that in there. And I like this transition to dirt here. So the man actually kind of backs off the throttle a little bit. So transition to dirt. Have I got anything from mine showing that? So I can jump into search the selected bin. Go to scene 4. So I've only got one little bit from my camera actually. None of it's on the dirt. Got the bridge there. Okay, maybe we'll just put that bit in just prior to that transition to dirt. Oh, that's what I forgot to do actually. There's another little setting. Image scaling. I go full frame with crop, which means that any of my 4:3 footage automatically fits. We want just a little bit extra of on the dirt. That's good. There's a little trick you can do. You can go in and out on that gap, and then when we go overwrite, it'll only overwrite it to that point, and then I can kind of shift it if I want.
Jungle. You know where we are? We're in the jungle, baby.
That's good. Okay, that works nicely. Now what bit I don't actually have in there is that we stopped because that's when my camera broke. I think we might actually swap it around a little bit. You know what? This is where you can start to be a little bit creative, because this bit kind of works. And all I want is a little bit coming down Bumble Hill. So we're just finding the best bit. What's the best bit in there? Going through a couple of corners. Oh, that bit's good. Now, see, Matt's actually talking there, but I'm not actually going to use any of that. You know what? I'm actually going to drop that in there. I'm going to insert, then delete gap, because that's where I want that to end up. there's another part of that story. We did stop at the bottom of the hill, but I don't know if I got enough there to really tell that bit. So I might just leave that part out, but then this is where I realised my camera was broken.
Got your ears on there, Smokey? Oh, shit.
Yeah, let's throw this at the end instead. So we've got that. And then I'll probably just add a little bit of voiceover to explain what's going on there. So I'll just grab a little bit of that vision. I'm actually going to end up putting that at the end. And that's where I'm going to add the voiceover. The trick with grabbing B-roll like that, as soon as you see the movement, then just roll it back until you don't see the movement again. And that's your best spot to grab. If you don't want that, what you want to avoid is that transition away from the camera. As soon as people see that, it just kind of breaks the vision. It doesn't look particularly great. So then we've got this refueling bit, which is this is where we changed our mind about what we're doing. So I'm just going to use the vision here. That's good pushing. Matt's got some great B-roll on there. Thank you, Matt. It was brilliant. And then even here when we're filling up, that's good. When you get those two bits of vision change in the B-roll, cut between them so they look like they're kind of different. This gives them distinctively different looks, so it doesn't look quite the same, or even use it in a slightly different spot. Just kind of break it up. And that, so this scene should end with the fueling up, and then we've got the run along Murray's Road as well. So we're going to end up with probably a couple of minutes of that. So that bit, I'm just going to find, there's a lot of vision there, right? So there's a whole bunch of files there. And I've only got, going off that plan, another 20 seconds or so of footage. So really what I'm going to have to do is be pretty brutal on this and just run through it really quickly, find the best bits, just use a couple of bits of it. Actually, you know what? Let's be funky. Matt's got his Spotify going here. What if we use it to start the music? That'd be fun. So I'll put that there. Not even going to use that bit, skip that. This is interesting because there's the road's closed. Don't need any of that. That looks pretty cool. Again, well, that looks nice through there. That's nice and pretty. Keep that in. Gotta be brutal. Gotta be brutal with this stuff. And that's where, because we know we're trying to just fill in 20, 30 seconds, we know what we're aiming at. So he gives us the permission to be brutal. Oh, those trees are nice. Nice through there. Couple of seconds of that. I'm pretty much at my 3 minutes now, so cattle grid, that looks pretty cool. Cool, that's it, that's got us. Okay, so that's how we're ended up at 3 minutes and 6 seconds. How's that? Now, one thing I do is I quickly go through and I just normalize the audio and all those, right? So I'm just going to go through and make sure they're all at the same, not necessarily volume, it's actually based on loudness, which is volume over time. You know, your perception of loud is how long you can sustain a certain volume for. So then I go through and do that. And then I'd actually set a little transition between each of them. So I've just got a shortcut there of Shift T, and that just creates an audio transition between each one of a couple of frames. That really smooths out the audio, just makes it not so clunky when you're listening back to it. It doesn't go click, click between all the scenes. So that's a neat trick. So that's just a little finessing. Just make sure all the audio.
Something's not entirely straight with this.
So there's bits in here, like those ones, like with Matt's audio, is I'll probably end up dropping that out and not using really much of it. But we can go through and do that later. Main thing we then do is we then run through the scene, watch the scene, make sure it all makes sense, make sure it flows nice, and then I'd probably start even chopping. I'd end up just chopping out anything that doesn't make sense, anything that doesn't flow as nice, and so on. But you're just really refining that 3 minutes, which is much easier to do than trying to refine 40 minutes. So by doing it scene by scene means we can kind of have that finesse. And that's it. So that is scene 3 done and ready. So now I can actually, I'm not going to start my full assembly, but I've got scene 3 there ready to go. So if I wanted to, I could actually create a new timeline with selected and actually give this call it main, whatever you want to call it, right? But that's going to be our scene 3. So it's going to sit somewhere in the middle of our main timeline. We're starting to develop our main timeline, but we're not going to even really worry about that at the moment because we're going to build out the other scenes first, and then we'll come back to our main timeline. Now to the other method.